I think we'll just wait for a couple of more minutes and then we can just dive in. Okay, I think since it's Friday evening, uh, and I will not want to go beyond our allotted time, I'm going to start. Uh, I welcome everybody for joining us today for this webinar, which is titled From Planning to Impact, RBPM in Action Across CSR and Non-Profits. I'm hoping everybody who has joined know that RBPM is for results-based program management. So this webinar will explore how RBPM is driving real transformation from strategy to planning to monitoring and evaluation, and then, of course, ultimately creating sustained impact on the ground. So the essence would be to understand the applicability and impact of RBPM in a CSR organization with which Tushara will share with us. And we'll also hear from the alumnus of the program, that is Jitesh, who will share his learnings from the program and how the experience was. Am I audible?
Your voice actually is less audible. It should be like a bit stronger. I do not know. Maybe it's because of your earphone. Like you said, you were doing some adjustments.
Better now?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So I extend a very warm welcome to both our panelists, Tushara, Shankar, and Jitesh Dhoot, and all the participants who have joined us online. Really appreciate all of you coming together on a Friday evening and doing this with us. I'll just introduce our panelists and then we'll get into the questions. So Tushara Shankar has a master's in social work from TIS, Mumbai, with specialization in urban and rural community development. She has over 2 decades of diverse experience with corporate entities, international profits, and consulting organizations. She's also been associated with a lot of bilateral, multilateral UN and government programs in a monitoring and evaluation role. Currently at Lupin, she heads the CSR initiatives and leads the foundation of the company that works for livelihood and healthcare domains in different parts of the country. Welcome so much, Tushara. Jitesh is a social sector professional with over 15 years of experience in project management, MEL, grant management, and compliance. Currently, he serves as an associate director at skilling and livelihood at Udayan Care and has previously worked with organizations like Sehgal Foundation, Pratham, and Bharti Airtel Foundation. Jitesh specializes in outcomes-driven projects, including development impact bonds, and has delivered CSR projects for a couple of organizations. He holds an MBA in Agriculture and Cooperative Management and Marketing from Kolhapur University, and of course is certified in RBPM from ISDM. Welcome to you too, Jitesh. So we'll start with asking questions to Tushara and Jitesh both, and the participants, you can use the Q&A section to put your questions in, which we can take after the some of the questions and some of the insights that the panelists have all shared. So Tushara, I'll start with you. As someone who has experience in initiating and implementing the results-oriented approach in your organization, Lupin Foundation, why do you think RBPM is becoming increasingly important in the CSR ecosystem?
Tushara, you are on mute, sorry.
Thank you, Priyanka. And like you said about Lupin Foundation, I will focus on that, not my 22 years of work in the development sector. So here, what happened was, I joined in 2021. Lupin Foundation is an organization that was established in 1988, and with a, of course, no CSR bill was in place at that time, and with the strong philosophy of people being able to uh, supported with livelihood solutions right where they belong, so they should not need to migrate, etc. That was the philosophy, and that's how it started. And over 3 decades implement a whole lot of programs. There was a lot of of course, financial resources and efforts by the implementing. It's a hardcore implementation organization, so a lot of physical and financial efforts had gone into the variety of locations that the foundation had worked in. But when I was interviewed, the first thing was that I was told was, we have done a huge amount of work in the sector, particularly livelihoods, agriculture based work, but we are not able to gauge impact of the kind of work that we do. So how it was happening over those 3 decades was that interventions were planned, the interventions happened, and then we were like struggling to, the organization was trying to figure out what the results were vis-a-vis, what is proposed in the RBPM kind of an environment where you look at results at the planning stage itself, and the project is per se is developed with a result based approach. So when everybody is, earlier, uh, I would say when the CSR bill came into place, a lot of organizations were still thinking as to how to do CSR, and where to go with it, how is the money going to get utilized. But now is the stage that, in the first 4 or 5 years, people did realize how does CSR actually happen. And then with a typical corporate mindset, it was seen that, anything that a corporate organization does from a business standpoint definitely has some strong impact. Otherwise, there's a pitch that is created for everything that is done. And similarly, now organizations funding non-profits or even funding their own foundations are asking those questions, and therefore it is becoming extremely important that the development ecosystem understands the value of the results based program planning, and it kind of sees and plans everything through that lens, with the result first approach. I would stop there, Priyanka.
Thank you so much, Tushara. Jitesh, Tushara was just talking about the design and implementation and how then RBPM becomes important. So before taking the RBPM course, how did you approach design and measurement, and what changed post certification?
Right. So that's a good question, and Tushara had answered to an extent in terms of like how the approach have changed in past few years. And especially like I started about 15 years back into the not-for-profit. Initially when I had to start to work in terms of like, I used to work on projects, directly get into hit the ground and, deliver the quality outcome, which is essentially in terms of like, wherein like wherever I've worked, it was more to, bring in the change and impact. But at the time of implementation, it was just focusing on the activity and, sort of making out the measurement later, probably at a stage wherein, we know something we have delivered and now it's time to measure something. And that is one big change I'll say, like after completion of the course, now when we are formulating new strategy in terms of like, of lately when in Udayan we were designing about a program strategy for, the next 5 years as a visioning plan. So first thing that came to mind is like, how do we strengthen our implementation as well as develop the measuring metrics on the go. So, when we are trying to implement and deliver, simultaneously we're working on the outcomes as well. So that's a balanced approach wherein we understand where we are heading to, what are the next steps, and what course correction we can take it to make, the outcomes better and strengthen the overall support. So yeah, largely this is a big change what I see in my, career graph after pursuing the course.
Okay, thank you so much. Tushara, we were just talking about how CSR programs, when they're being designed and implemented, and what are the different orientations that are there. So what would you say are some of the common barriers CSR teams face when they're trying to implement RBPM?
Yeah. So I would say, the CSR teams, not just the CSR teams, but also the non-profit teams, in most cases, are coming from that whole old school of thought of being implementing in a certain way, right? So development sector over 50, 60 years worked in a certain manner in which it was more. Initially it started with a philanthropy kind of an approach where you got funders, and India saw a lot of external funding in the from 1950s until, I would say, until 2000s. 2000, I mean, mid 2000s is where the foreign funding started shrinking, where a lot of this funding was happening from a philanthropic approach, and people, while there were project objectives, etc., but nobody was very driven towards outcomes, and organizations were really, more into getting the numbers right. So they have to reach out to a certain number. The entire narrative was about reaching out to a certain number of people. And now, if you see that thing, like we were discussing in the previous question, that organizations, the funding partners, your own corporate organizations are constantly asking for, yes, so what happened? Great, you worked with so many people, you gave so and so many things to a very large set of people, then so what exactly happened out of that? And the problems are that the workforce is still stuck in that whole understanding, and there's this whole gap of understanding, and that people, that the corporate organizations do not understand us. They do not see the kind of challenges that we face. Or in case of CSR teams where they are working with implementing NGOs, if they have no clarity on this whole, how would this result based approach work, they are not going to be able to support. Even if you have, say, converted through maybe a person like Jitesh, he has worked with a large team and made them think from a result based management orientation. But yet, if this team isn't convinced about it, then they are not going to have the patience and understanding of how this entire thing works and why we should look at what we are looking at. They would also be stuck at a certain numbers, and then there'll be a whole mismatch of how things go. So that's the barrier, I would say. Development way of working has not been very result based, so as to say. We have had approaches, the frameworks that we have worked with for a while, but yet the overall mental approach towards doing good is slightly, I would say, less management oriented than it should have been. And I am glad that the result based management is bringing that aspect in the front.
Okay. So Jitesh, sharing your experiences on how to operationalize, right, and how to address some of the challenges that Tushara just mentioned. So if you can just give like concrete examples of how you were able to use the tools and frameworks that you learned during the program, or or how you started shifting towards RBPM.
Right. So it's very valid in terms of like when we approach to a program for implementation, it is very much necessary to converse with all the stakeholders. It is not just the donor partner and the implementing agency to work on a project, but also take inputs from the local community members whom probably would be our outreach and the beneficiary as part of impact. And essentially with this, the combination, it is also equally important to keep on reporting, communicating about the results, what's happening on ground. And that's not just the anecdotal experiences or probably the case studies. It should be, evidence-based. That is like more of data-driven discussion. What have been the approach, what is the outcome, and how likely it is going to impact the community at large. So that is one thing which is very important. And largely, as you know, we have been seeing there's a lot of changes happening in the ecosystem in terms of like earlier it was more of the numbers, but right now it is more into the depth in terms of understanding what is happening, what's going well, and what's not working out at the field level. So, an interesting example in terms of like during COVID, there were like multiple NGOs and different projects were running on ground getting implemented. But because of the sudden lockdown and, the change in the policy, the shift, it became very complicated to implement multiple projects. But on the other side of it, if you have, sort of a good team or probably the support from the donor agency, it becomes very easy. So for an example, like during those days, I was into education sector implementing a program for primary schools. It was difficult. The schools were shut for long years. It was like almost a year schools were not working. And we had defined outcomes to deliver in like 2 to 3 years. But that would not happen because the schools were shut and we could not get engaged in the pedagogy and teaching regularly. So what was this shift, which was like well accepted by the CSR partner as well? And they also acknowledged to change the strategy, which really helped to deliver the outcome. And that's not all, not only the outcome, but the impact which were like multifold. That's because every stakeholder and the important decisions were taken together. So, that is something which really helped out.
Okay, thank you for that, Jitesh. So, Tushara, since you've been in the CSR organizations and you're leading these foundations also, so how do you think the CSR organizations can overcome resistance to a shift from what you said, activity-based to more results-based approaches?
I think that's a difficult question, but we are all, I think, jointly trying to work towards it. I think a lot of organizations are already thinking and working with that kind of an approach. In our case, what we did is, while in our entire program transition, we said, the whole approach, like I said in the beginning, we were very large scale, we were very extensive, and then we brought it to a more intensive kind of an approach. We wrote down all, and see, we you have to understand this very interesting thing that was happening in Lupin Foundation. And what was it was that we have, as a foundation, we also accept funds from other donors. So we have Lupin funds, and then we have donor funds. And what was and typically in a donor fund kind of a scenario, you have more structure, you have more objectives, and then the donor is asking for certain kind of results, etc., and then you are more focused towards it. But where the funds, on the other side, the funds that were coming from Lupin, where there was far less accountability and far less stakeholder engagement, and all of that was very limited. It was more like, we do a basic needs assessment of the community, and then we understand what does this community require, and then you kind of give it. So that, that approach was, well, internally we worked on workshops on trying to make the teams. And when I say teams, they are fairly large teams. So we were largely targeting the first rung, the ones that were decision makers, who could then take it to the people who actually work on ground, because RBPM will have to work at all levels, right? It cannot only work at the top of the organization level. A lot of times there's faster and easier clarity at the top level for for these kind of strategic changes, but to trickle it down, to make it really work with the lowest rung, the people who are right in the field implementing it, was a difficult piece. We also did an exercise with ISDM on result based program management, and that was hugely appreciated by our teams. And all this sounds very jargonistic, the result based management, or whenever you talk of any framework, but if you kind of simplify it, break it down to very kind of simple kind of an understanding. So I still remember that from the workshop. I also sat through the workshop, proving and improving, and in a monitoring process, you do proving and improving. So that is a very simple way of understanding, and then executing it becomes far simpler. So to me, I think that was one of the key things, to break it down, to make it simple for people to understand. And it's not as difficult, it's not as challenging, it's not that you are threatened with your secure kind of an understanding of your work, is something that really helped in our case, in our teams thinking more like in that direction. And we have now, surprisingly, yesterday we were having a review meeting, and some of the not so senior resources in our team were speaking the language that we would like to hear. So that is something that is the outcome of thinking in a result based manner, and I think that is slowly being achieved. And like I said, it's a tough task. It is a process of converting a certain mindset, which we all know is not an easy task. But working with a huge set of people, including all the stakeholders concerned, is I think what works best for removing barriers.
Right, that's very insightful. And Jitesh, as a follow-up question to that, you were just talking about impact and talking to the funders as well. But in what ways do you think RBPM can shift or has shifted how you communicate impact, and not just to the funders, but also to your own team and in the community where you're working?
Right. So I guess you made it easy in terms of like picking up the line from Tushara thing. So I was also thinking the same. Like as she mentioned, it is very important for the internal team also to absorb. The project is not only outcome oriented or probably for the external facing audience, which is like our donor partner, other technical partner, as well as the community. So it is very critical, at all levels, in terms of like starting from the field, either you take top down or bottom up approach, it has to be in the same manner. As in, what is the end objective, how we gonna achieve it, and what are the various processes and framework that has to be in place, so that everyone across the project are on the same page and speaking the same language. That's very important. Secondly, whenever there's like probably a cadence for a weekly check-in or a fortnight check-in. It just should not be based on the anecdotal story which I was just talking about earlier in my previous answer, and just the updates. We did this, हमने ये कर लिया, ये achievement हो गया. That is not right to an extent. It is great. Everyone is putting in a lot of efforts to get some result and drive the project for the outcome. With that, if we include some numbers which are clearly able to communicate or probably articulate at a level wherein just she mentioned that one of my team member was able to say and bring out the story which is at the board level or probably at the senior team member. So that is something which is important, and it has to be logical, because if you set up the processes, it will be driven by some logic at all levels. It is when you are working at field, probably at the block level, there will be block aggregation. Then at the district and coming on to the national plan picture for the senior management, something which is well deserved. As well as the one more important part, the result is not just about the activities and number. It has to be structured and communicated, which clearly shows like what was the impact and how it was implemented, so that the effect is largely seen at the grass level, which is wherein the real picture or the real change drive. So that is also crucial in terms of like understanding and communicate at all levels within and outside the organization. Yeah.
Thank you, Jitesh. So, Tushara, I think I'll build on what Jitesh said. So, how do you think RBPM or result-based approach can also help speak to the funders, not just for transparency, but also address problems of or challenges of accountability as well?
Yeah, so Priyanka, I think Jitesh would be in a better capacity of addressing this, but because he seems to have worked on impact bonds, etc. But I really think that as we grow in this journey, in the entire CSR journey, the development journey, we'll all see that funders are expecting more and more transparency, and funders are expecting result based funding. So you are unless you're able to reach a certain result, you're not going to get your second tranche. And the moment that kind of a project financing is in place, you end up from a social investment, it will be looked at as not as a grant but as a social investment. I think accountability rises at every level. And with the corporatization, I mean, there is a lot of people do use that slightly negatively in the development space, but then there's a corporatization happening with more and more only CSR funding being available and the other kind of international funding dropping rapidly. There will be more business like approach to everything that you do in the development sector. So it's going to be in future very, very impact investment oriented, impact funding. There'll be result based financing. So that is something that we all need to be really prepared for, and therefore look at everything, it's from an outcome focused approach. And that's the only thing that we would need to be concentrating on, and not really dropping the old mindset of looking at reaching an entire district, a very large number, etc.
So, Tushar, I'll just probably just build up to that because you've been working in this particular space for a long time now. So what I know, we talked about how do you build capacity and how do you break down from complex to simple, complex concepts into simpler ones. But what are the other capacity gaps that you observe in development professionals in relation in the context of particularly this result-based program design and when it comes to management?
Right. So, I don't think, of course, I graduated many, many years ago. So my information about today's academics could be limited. But from what I have gathered is that even in today's education of, say, the who comes to development sector, of course, there are technocrats also who come, but then there are mostly social work graduates, you have rural development graduates, and people like, that is the profile typically. And result based program management is not being taught in these courses. You are taught community mobilization, you are taught financial management, how to run an NGO. All of that is taught in our subjects, the social welfare administration and all of that. But what is not being taught is this outcome focus. And I think it's high time that even academic institutions start incorporating a course like that into their masters. Or yeah, I think bachelor's course also is there in these subjects, so bachelor's or master's course. And that will really help in building the entire understanding, because of course there's a lot that will come from practice. But right in the beginning, if a fresher, like a student, gets an exposure to it in the institution, it becomes far easier to start thinking right from the beginning in that structure, rather than after starting to work and after 3 4 5 6 years of your work, and that's when you get your exposure. It's difficult to kind of unlearn and learn this new practice. So I think that's a gap. People do not have understanding of result based management. In fact, I constantly repeat this in wherever I speak on a variety of issues, that the younger generation these days, they are also have a lot of impatience. So they do not stick around to in an organization to look, I mean, it's irrespective of development, corporate, wherever, to sit around and see the results. So you will never really are able to, and you're never going to be able to understand the impact of your work until you stick around for a certain period of time, because development interventions programs take a bit of a time. They're not like business results that they can be gauged every quarter. A lot of times you have to wait for a year or 2 or 5 years to kind of see the impact on ground. So I guess those
Right.
are things that could probably be filled, and organizations like yours are kind of trying to do that bit, of course.
Thank you. Jitesh, I'm going to put you on spot as a development professional, apart from learning these tools and frameworks as a practitioner, do you think RBPM has added any personal values, or, has there been any personal shifts?
So, right, there are a couple of them, and I'm sure like this will help many of us in terms of like क्या करना चाहिए, कैसे करना चाहिए. That is more important. And also, when we talk about specialized courses which are meant for social sector and which drives the outcome, it is essentially that we study most of the tools and framework as we go during our courses. Like I was lucky enough when I did my master's MBA in agriculture and cooperative management, we had one whole semester onto them. So, from that way, I built it on, and I was lucky. I did my internship, got my PPO. So I had that clinch and advantage to, get into social sector. One was that. Secondly, you need to be a little passionate as well and patient, because these two P are important. One, because if you don't have passion to, probably support the community and work with them when they are in need, actually, that is important. And then patient, obviously, because I guess most of the project take years. And when you keep on changing your strategy, like year one, you had something, year two, you change it to something, and year three, you had a total different strategy. It will not give you the end outcome, what you have decided at the year one or during the inception. So, as you go on to plan your program, one thing which I've learned over the year is like it is important parallelly to plan the MEL framework, which is essentially you keep on monitoring. You will have change. Course correction would be definitely there, but then that will be more from the implementation side, as in what are the inputs which need a quality integration and what has to be the scale up, which again bring into the section of capacity building of the internal team. नॉट नेसेसरी कि आपने जो प्लान किया था, जो लोगों को हायर किया था 2 साल पहले, वो सेम स्ट्रैटेजी यूज हो. You need to build them up because at the time of inception the inputs are very different, and as you go to deliver the project it changes. So for that it is almost essential and necessary to upskill from time to time, and given orientation of the outcome, what we have been doing is in the right direction, but if we add this, then there will be x fold of impact which can drive the project. So that outcome orientation as well as learning onto the multiple strategy is something which is essentially, it is already there. It is not that the youngster or probably the biggest who are there in the sector are not doing that, but translating that and getting into implementation effectively, that is something which has a gap. And definitely, the courses like RBPM or probably working on short courses to understand the strategies which can be implemented into various domain and sector does always help. And it gives you a path to succeed in terms of like the structured manner and clear defining the outcome. So yeah, that's what like I had on my mind.
Yes.
Mute.
Yes. I'll take a couple of more minutes to probably ask my last questions to both you and Tushara, and then we'll open the floor to participants. So Jitesh, so what advice would you give to other non-profit leaders or program managers who might be considering RBPM, but they're also unsure if it's worth the investment?
So definitely it's a worth investment in terms of like, I was just talking about the scaling up. When I started, I had this orientation, the outcome and probably the passion to work onto it. But then, taking up this course personally, it has been like a great investment for me. And I was supported by my leadership team and organization to, sponsor and enroll me for this. And secondly, it gives you all the resources and material. I won't say that, these are something which are unique, not available in the open market or probably Google or somewhere else. But आपको एक जगह लाना, under one roof and, facilitating it in a very professional manner is something which really helps. And once, it is more structured, framework oriented, like, step by step where you're going to head to. So you also have that mindset, what you have learned so far, what is the additional thing you will be doing it, and what is the end expectation you have with this. So, if I have to summarize or probably say it in a word, this is not just a course. Honestly, for me, it was like a shift, how I think, how I plan, and, lead a project. So very important.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jitesh. Last question to you, Tushara. So as a CSR head, what value do you see in certificate program like this RBPM, which caters to both non-profit practitioners and CSR teams? And what would be your suggestion?
Yes, so like I've been saying right from the beginning in this webinar is, non-profits and CSRs. I mean, in our case, it's different. We are a foundation, implementing foundation of the corporate, and we have our own implementation team. But typically how CSR works is that, CSR funds to certain non-profits, and then, they are also unable to a lot of times understand. They're also stuck in the kind of the notifications that come from the corporate affairs department and the MCA basically, and then they are not able to figure out what should be the administrative cost, what is the project cost, and why is a certain amount of money being planned for a certain thing by a non-profit. So I think bringing having this kind of a certificate program for the non-profit practitioners as well as CSR teams would kind of bring in that kind of a parity of understanding. And also from the non-profit side, a lot of times they are very disgruntled about corporates not understanding their approach at all. So they're coming together and being on the same page would create a win-win situation for the entire CSR ecosystem. The people who can support with the money, and the people who have the expertise of taking it to the right beneficiaries. It's just that both these set of peoples learn the way of implementation, then this whole question of, a lot of times you'd hear it from corporates that, these days even NGOs are charging a lot of administration fees, because of course they would need to charge a good administration fees, because they need to also recruit the right kind of resources who can think in a pure management kind of a lens. They would not think from a volunteering typical philanthropic implementation lens. They would need that kind of an approach to be looking at programs. And it's essential for people maybe who have spent many years doing a lot of things in the development sector, but probably have not got the opportunity to do it from an RBPM perspective. I think I've heard, I have not done a certificate program myself, but I could see the kind of impact that only a 1-day workshop with my team on RBPM did help. So I can clearly see that this would support the overall ecosystem in being able to implement the programs from a impact lens, and that impact lens would be really helpful for the funders, because there'll be more transparency and accountability for from the people who implement. There'll be the external stakeholders like maybe government or anybody else who's involved in that program and that location, that it'll be interesting for them to understand how this kind of an approach really works in in every typically all development or CSR programs. What we look at as a sustainability plan is engaging with the government and making sure that government is able to take it up and run it, or maybe some other organization will be able to take it up, or more a scaling up kind of a thing would happen for the kind of work that we or that particular organization is trying to do that. So I see a lot of it happening through a certificate program like RBPM, and helping people learn and in their mid-career stages. Thank you.
Right. Thank you so much. I will open the floor for questions, and I can already see in the Q&A section there are a couple of questions that are there. I'll read out the question, and Jitesh and Tushara, both of you can probably chip in to answer these questions. So the first question is, what are some of your lessons learned or mistakes others can avoid while implementing RBPM?
So I'll take this up, and Tushara, please add. So I think two things is very important. One is like planning has to be super strong in terms of like going through a process wherein you understand what are the framework you are taking it up, what are the input activities, and then the delivery outcome. The second, in terms of like when you are doing, following a process, it has to be measured. So that same framework should be in place at the time of inception or, during the implementation. This is one which is essentially very important. The second bit is more about, building the capacity of the team. There are varied projects which are being simultaneously implemented or one after the other. So all of the project would have different approaches and at different levels. So, even if in one project, like we are working across multiple blocks and districts, it may not have the same outcome and the same input. So, the variation, the delta into the input should be very well understood and delivered. That is something which, you can gauge through some of the component and tools, especially like when you design the TOC, you should be well aware wherein what will fit in and at what time the activity to begin with. So that's one example.
Yeah. I'll just add on to what Jitesh said. I think very, very important that the focus continues to be on outcomes. It's outcomes, outcomes, and outcomes only. And, monitoring is not done for the sake of monitoring. There should be, constant review of that monitoring, and to be able to adapt from whatever has been learned from that outcome monitoring. I said that this is all about proving and improving. So RBM is not just you do not complete the cycle. You do to focus on outcomes, to adapt to whatever you've learned from the outcome monitoring, and never never stop involving the stakeholders at any stage. So at all steps of the program implementation, you have to ensure that you have feedback from all the stakeholders to ensure that you are on the right track. Looking at, if you budget, again, you're thinking RBM and you are budgeting for activities, then it's not going to really work. You need to budget with outcomes and outputs in mind. And the second level, you cannot think of the primary intervention. And then you have to keep it simple. Your result based management framework has to be simple and easily understandable and graspable by all your team members. Yeah.
Okay. We have next question from Indira Mahendrabara, and this is for Tushara. So does CSR team involve Gram Panchayat development officers at the planning stage of any interventions?
Absolutely, 100% in every intervention, because we need ownership. We for an organization like ours, we are working on agriculture based livelihoods. We work on water conservation related efforts, and that a lot of times on common lands, etc. And when you are choosing, say, you in a typical program, you do not always have the entire village as your beneficiaries. You certainly choose your beneficiaries, and it's very, very important that the right kind of beneficiaries are chosen. And all of us I'm sure in this room, and anyone who's implementing development program wants to impact the most needy, the person in the village who's most needy. So getting and help in identifying the right kind of people and keeping it as non-controversial as possible. Certainly the Gram Panchayat lead has to be involved. It's not that he or she gets to dominate the entire plan. Definitely there are other stakeholders who are also involved, but that is most certain and very important that we take them along. In our case, we also work with block level officers and district collectors as and when required, but certainly the Gram Panchayat officials are involved.
Okay, the next question is, I think, from Sanjeev Pandey. He's asking, how do you assess the capacity building needs of CSR teams and other teams in a social purpose organization?
So, yeah, I'll respond to that first. Jitesh, you can add. For this organization, for social purpose organizations, it's not going to be any different from any other kind of organizations. You need to do see, there are certain things that you can identify while you're working. If your organization has a structured monitoring system, you will know what is the need of majority of your employees while you are conducting those monitoring exercises. And to top that, you can have structured training needs assessment. So even before doing the RBM workshop with ISDM, we had done a training needs assessment. And we are an organization that plans for, we create a learning and development calendar for our teams. And for that, every time we are doing the training needs assessment, because we have all categories of staff, right? And their needs are going to be very different from each other.
Jitesh, would you want to add anything?
So we go about and we decide on what kind of capacity building would be required for them.
So yeah, thanks. I second that. To be very precise in terms of like when I was giving answer to one of your question in terms of at all level, the communication has to be simple and straight. So understanding is something which goes as a capacity building as well as, the assessment, what we do at ground. So like outcome is essential to measure the project outcome, but what inputs are going, what are the qualities, how we are thinking about it. That is essentially something to be thought upon. And as we progress, things, do changes. So there is an important metric for, implementing such sort of capacity building and understanding the team strength, which is like the RECI, which is responsible accountability and, consulted informed. So many a time there are small decisions which are taken at the field level. It is perfectly fine because that was the need of that particular intervention or the location. But that has to be, informed, as well as somebody has to be accountable for it. And if it is not informed to the management and the other team members, the vertical, it gets difficult to respond in the same language. So, these are the nuances which should be taken into account when we build the capacity so that, others are well informed as well as taken onto the, the ownership and accountability of the delivery project.
Okay, thank you. We have another question from Sumedha. Question is, how can the RBPM framework be applied when presenting qualitative impact, where the number of beneficiaries may be small, but the stories and transformations are deeply significant and life-changing?
Right. So I'll take this first because in education, it does happen many a time as well as for the skilling. So, there are multiple anecdotes, like for an example, even now into skilling, where when a student is trained or probably a child is trained for an employment course based on the IT learning, initially, that will go as a case study in terms of like what the child has learned, what he or she has achieved after, completing or graduating from the computer course. Eventually, that story or narrative turned into a case study as well as the quantitative information, which is like when she or he started the job, they had a limited exposure. They were placed as intern or probably the the starter in the company. As they grow, they learn new skill, add on the values from the organization. They turn into a permanent employee. So there's a statistical change in terms of like what's getting placed and learning and growing in that organization, bring in the change in their number, as well as the experiences added to it. So, this is something the qualitative is well needed to, structure your outcome as well as triangulate what impact or where you're heading to. Hope this answers to an extent.
So, Shara, did you want to add anything to this?
Yes, I agree with Jitesh, and we also see, there is, of course, results are both quantitative and qualitative. So it can be objectively measured and also subjectively measured. And while for say agriculture-based livelihoods, I work with a certain number of farmers, and the ultimate goal is to enhance the income of the farmers. But there are various other things that are happening with that farmer in the process of getting a higher income. So those pieces are definitely getting captured in the qualitative results. And how is the overall family status improving? Have they got a new vehicle added to their family? Have they got some assets to the family? Where have they been able to send their children to better schools, etc.? So there are measures like those. And also for our healthcare program, where you just don't count the number of people who attend your health camps. They are obviously, they're regularly monitored, followed up. Their adherence to treatment is what we look at. We work in tertiary level care space, wherein we work on non-communicable diseases. So right from the screening to taking them all the way to, if required, some tests that are not available within our mobile medical vans, and definitely not available within their villages, etc., referring them and bearing the cost of uh, any additional tests that they require. So all of that pieces is a lot of improvement of quality of life for that person. So if that person was not able to say be able to do his or her daily chores properly, whether he or she is able to do that, whether he or she is able to kind of contribute economically. Maybe they were because of a certain disease that could just be managed, they were not able to go out and earn that income. I think that piece is now happening. So all of that gets captured in case studies and documented well. And I think, again, that's how qualitative results are captured.
Great. We have another question from Sambudh Chakrabarti. The question is, RBPM has to be embedded right at the heart of where the activities take place and where we are expecting the outcomes. So how does RBPM govern inclusivity, growth with sustainability at the core?
Difficult one. I'll try to answer and please supplement. So I think, as I've mentioned, whenever you plan an intervention or probably do the at the very beginning of the project implementation, the result metrics and framework has to be in place alongside, because that's essential. So when you begin at the same time, it will be, sort of a growth and sustainability for your project as well as for your outcome. This is one bit of it. And secondly, when we say, it has to be embedded into the system. So it is not only about the one project. Probably, the organization would have different and multiple verticals. So if everything is gone, by a framework or a structured processes wherein it is more of standardization, it always helps to, make the process simple and deliver it in a more appropriate and effective manner. Please add.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes, Jitesh. No, I just wanted to say that the moment you think from a result perspective, you do result-based planning, it naturally brings in the sustainability element. Because yeah, you obviously as an organization do not want any of your interventions to fall through as soon as you withdraw. So the moment you look at results, you always look at how to sustain that. And inclusivity, I in RBPM, I don't think that's the only piece in through which you kind of cater to inclusivity. I believe most and all development projects should anyway, with or without RBPM approach, should be looking at inclusivity and have been positively looking at inclusivity over a long period of time. We a more structured approach just makes you think in more in depth as to whether you are looking at all your stake. The moment you map your stakeholders, and the moment you try to ensure that you're getting feedback from all of them right from the planning stage, is where I'm sure you will not be missing out on inclusion kind of aspects.
Thank you. There's one more question. I think we have touched upon this question in multiple ways, but probably we can give more focused reply to this. So the question is, can you share a particular incident where you could apply RBPM learnings and feel the difference?
That's for me, maybe. So I'll begin in. I would like to share two examples, as in like one for the education and other one for the skilling, what I'm doing now. So I'll begin with the skilling. So, when we started to revisit our strategy for the skilling and livelihood program, we as a team came together, to design and build the way forward strategy. It was very essential for us to, get on an alignment to understand what so far we have been able to, achieve and what will be the next course of action in line to the ecosystem or, the dynamic market which has been driven in terms of like the new trades are coming in and there are a lot of things which are, phasing out. So a comprehensive TOC banana. So, that needed a lot of clarification around assumptions and, to strengthen ourselves internally. What are the next step, which is essentially to build in the quality component to bring in the change or probably add newer trades. So that's one thing. And on the other part of it, it is like it has helped us to, strengthen our fundraising pitch also. Now we know, we are heading to this. So it becomes our portfolio a very strong point. The second example I would like to take is onto the education because in education, like I was working on to one of the project which was into development impact bond, which by name itself says, outcome driven. So when you plan your MLE structure and the reporting framework, it is very much essential to, get a buy-in from all the stakeholders. Because if you build onto something which is in isolation as part of implementation partner or the implementing agency, it becomes very, difficult when you have your regular cadence check-in with the donor partner as well as the performance manager. Because in consortium or probably when we are working in collaboration, there are multiple entities. So, as you go forward, you keep on building that. So this is one, great example. Especially not only for the outcome driven project or probably development impact bond, but for all across project, you need to be a little structured and take it through the partners essentially to get a buy-in and a nod for it. So yes, two examples from me, Shara.
No, that's all right. I think that's enough.
I think we have time to take one more question. So we have a question from Sumedha. What kind of technology platforms or digital tools can be adopted to effectively implement RBPM, ensuring real-time data collection, M&E across diverse geographies and program verticals, which are also not too expensive?
So I'd go first, but I don't think I have the apt answer for this question. Has ISDM developed a RBPM based tech platform? Not sure about that, but certainly the kind of tech platform the way we look at it is we look at tech platforms that are domain specific. So for agriculture, we are using a certain tech platform, and for healthcare we are using a certain tech platform, and both are designed very differently, and with a result orientation capturing every bit that is important. So and we have, we have tried generic tech platforms as well, and that in our case hasn't really worked much. So we have looked at combination of tech experts and domain experts who could give us the right kind of drive for being able to monitor the program well, and then obviously gauge results out of those based on the kind of inputs and data that is provided into that tech platform.
Jitesh, do you want to add anything to this?
Yeah, I have been thinking, and especially, at the end of the question, there was like, which are not too expensive. So, there are multiple tools. The basic tool can be MS Office Excel. Excel hai bahut sahi hai. You can develop a lot of things onto it. And, technology is not the only bit which will help you to drive the result or probably map what you have been doing and achieving. So, like rightly Tushara said, it's a combination of M&E expert as well as the technological expert to build in a platform which is more useful. And from moreover, like from the perspective of implementing agency or implementing partner, सिर्फ build करने से बहुत importance नहीं आएगा. You need to actually use those results as a data-driven decision making. So if you make or develop something which is very fancy, now there's a lot of buzzword in terms of like a dashboard hona chahiye. Dashboard theek hai, but what is next? You should think. So these are some of the essential question, whatever we do in terms of like even for the implementation, collecting data, there are multiple data points what we collect. But essentially how they are clubbed, tabulated and used for making a decision is equally important. So I believe for me personally, matlab, this is my view. आपको बहुत fancy tool लेने का जरूरत नहीं है. You can have a simple tool, but the thinking has to be, apt with the project in terms of like the input, delivery, and the outcome. So आप Excel भी use कर सकते हो, which is I think largely free, and everyone has the MS Office too. So this is my suggestion. If you really want to go on to the some software, so the basics one, these are the paid subscription probably. So like you can use the Google spreadsheet also. There is Studio Looker something, which gives you a dashboard. Then if you want to get into a paid subscription, there are multiple agencies like Upshot, Service ETOs, which gives you, a lot of direction to collect data as well as put it onto a dashboard wherein decisions are essentially taken from it. Assuming we take decisions on the data. So that is something important.
Right. Thank you so much. I think we are just in time, and really appreciate all the great questions that came in from the participants. The question was that the panel was really insightful to me as well. I also learned a lot of things along the way. Thank you so much for discussing how RBPM is not just about strengthening your measurement, but also at all levels from planning to implementation. And it is important for internal teams as important it is to communicate externally. Thank you so much, Jitesh, Tushara, and everybody who tuned in today for this insightful webinar. Have a good weekend ahead. Good evening.
Thank you so much, Priyanka. Thank you, Jitesh, and all the audience over here. Very interesting. Thank you.
Right. Same here. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.